Mr. President, remember when President Trump announced he would end the war in Ukraine on his first day in office? Instead, over a year and a half later, President Trump and Vice President Vance have publicly humiliated Ukrainian President Zelensky and made embarrassing friendly overtures to the man who attacked his country, who attacked Ukraine, Russian President Putin. It's hard to understand. Mr. Putin's response has been to thumb his nose at the United States and any efforts toward peace. In fact, in recent months, Putin has launched some of the deadliest attacks on civilian targets since the Ukrainian war began. This invasion by the Russians of Ukraine has now lasted longer than World War I. Let me repeat that. This invasion of Ukraine by the Russians and Vladimir Putin has now led to a conflict that has lasted longer than World War I. On Monday, Russia fired a barrage of missiles at several major Ukrainian cities, killing at least 11 people and sparking a massive fire at one of the most important Orthodox monasteries, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And Russia has continued its acts of sabotage and provocation throughout NATO and Europe, not to mention its supplying of targeting information to Iran to hit U.S. interests in the region. Imagine my surprise that amid all of these Russian attacks on Ukraine and neighboring countries, the Trump administration sent a U.S. official to Putin's annual economic conference earlier this month in St. Petersburg, Russia. We had an official delegation to Putin's economic development conference for Russia while we are trying to stop them from attacking Ukraine and other countries. This annual event, we had a U.S. chairman of the Commission of Fine Arts representing the United States. His name is Rodney Mems Cook, Jr. He was at the event with President Putin in St. Petersburg to talk about economic development in Russia. And yet, you may recall, Mr. Cook is beneficially helping President Trump with his grandiose ballroom and arch projects. Why would President Trump give any U.S. legitimacy to this Russia propaganda event while Putin continues to bomb Ukraine and snub efforts to end the war? Why would President Trump proceed with recently reported plans to significantly reduce air and naval assets available for NATO operations in Europe while Putin continues this mayhem? On Tuesday, President Trump went as far as to signal that the war in Ukraine was not a priority of the United States. President Trump told reporters at the G7 summit, and I quote, "We had nothing to do," close quote, "with a war that was, quote, thousands of miles away." I could not disagree more. It is long overdue that the Pentagon spend the $400 million in Ukraine assistance appropriated by Congress and signed into law by the President, and the $200 million in Baltic security funds as Congress passed several months ago. I raised the point that we had appropriated these funds officially, signed by President Trump, at a recent hearing with Secretary Hegseth and Secretary Rubio. They indicated to me the funds were just getting ready any day now to be moved, which I hope is correct, as these should have been sent long ago and not delayed any further. It also is long overdue for this chamber to act on Russia and Ukraine-related legislation. A few weeks ago, the House of Representatives overwhelmingly, on a bipartisan basis, passed a bill to provide additional security aid to Ukraine and tighten sanctions on Russia. That is exactly what is needed to force Russia to finally negotiate a peace and stop this attack on Ukraine and its people. And here in the Senate, we have a broad, bipartisan Russian sanctions bill that's been pending for months without action. So while we send the President's ballroom representative to represent the United States of America in St. Petersburg, Russia, and talk about Putin's plans for rebuilding Russia's economy. While that is going on, Russia is attacking the Ukrainians and neighboring countries, and the United States, through the president, has announced that's none of our business. Last week, Bureau of Labor Statistics reported and confirmed what Americans already knew. Inflation is at a 3-year high, marking the second straight month inflation outpaced wage growth. Rising energy costs are crushing American families, and their dollar simply doesn't stretch as far anymore. It's a lose-lose scenario. In a birthday present to the president, NBC News polling revealed the president's approval rating hit an all-time low for his second term. It's no wonder why. In my home state of Illinois, the average household has had to spend $3,400 more on goods and services during President Trump's second term, despite the president's campaign pledge to lower costs on day one. Another broken promise. That's according to a new report released by the Joint Economic Committee. That same report also details what Illinois families have spent. While President's second term has transpired, Illinois families on average spent $815 more than in the previous similar period on housing costs, rent, mortgage payments, and the like. $310 more for groceries in the President Trump's first year compared to 2024, and more than $350 more on gasoline since the start of the Iran war a little over 100 days ago. What was the president's official response? And I quote, "I love the inflation," the president said. During the vote-a-rama earlier this month on the president's mass deportation funding bill, Senate Democrats offered numerous amendments to address this affordability crisis, which the president barely acknowledges. Senate Democrats offered a proposal that will fund the largest federal grant program to create more affordable housing. We put forth a measure that would investigate health insurance companies that are denying patients the care they need. And we gave Republicans a chance to join us in ending for good the president's anti-weaponization slush fund of taxpayer dollars to cop beaters of January 6th. At all these opportunities, too many Republicans refused to join us. When will the Republican Party join the Democrats in the Senate to provide relief to struggling families in their own home states? Only time will tell. Senate Democrats will continue to put forward legislation to help families with rising costs of gasoline, groceries, housing, child and health care. We will put Republicans on the record. I hope they'll join us in a bipartisan effort to give American families real relief. And I yield the floor.